Welcome everyone to our panel on biracial game design. We'll introduce ourselves first. I am Camdon Wright. I am a game designer, writer, and the current, what is my job? The current diversity coordinator for the IGDN.
Do I work?
Do I work? Do I even do a thing? What is my title? This is why business cards exist. I will throw it off to Whitney.
Hi, I'm Whitney. I am also a game designer and an artist. I am responsible for the brand Little Witch Productions, and I recently published my first role-playing game, Prism. And I will leave it up to this person.
Hello, I am Avraham. I'm a community organizer, game designer, winner of the 2019 IGDN sponsorship. And I am a all-around biracial nerd, as per our topic.
What, really?
Yeah. So I think thinking about that, I feel that games and the game designers, we put a little piece of ourselves into everything we create or try to, or I was told that if I sell a certain part of myself, my game would actually work and get bought. And I think regarding that, being a biracial game designer means a lot to me. And I think as we're going to just learn a lot of people from the panel, but specifically it makes me realize what I want to see happening within the world of game designing, what I think is missing within the world of game designing, and how much representation matters. When you do see that game come out that can speak to individuals who are not normally and usually in the forefront of media in general, it is a huge win, and it is a huge undertaking and matters to people. You may not realize it, you may not see it, but that aspect and that thing coming out into the world and being present is such an important thing, such an important piece of art that is happening.
Awesome. So, Whitney, your thoughts?
Is this the question about being raised biracial impacts?
Yes. Hey, Whitney. How does being biracial impact your design and the content of your game, much as Avraham just spoke to?
As a game designer that apparently doesn't know how to follow directions, it almost makes me not want to talk about race or ethnicity at all as a biracial nerd, because I don't really want to accidentally go on the train tracks of being team white or not white. And I don't know if it's because it's growing up, I was a huge nature documentary and sea creature nerd, but most of the time I feel like when I make a game, most of my games are about aquatic humanoids. I'm using that as kind of a workaround of having to talk about races. They're a beluga person. If you associate that with Russia, that's your problem, not mine. And as an artist, I know it causes a bit of stress because I always want to make sure that my skin tones are a rainbow of not just white. Because I know when I was working on Prism, I had a character that was literally white skin, because that's part of their racial trait, because they mimic elements. So it's this is their clean slate mode. And I was like, I can't have all my artwork be this one family in the game. Otherwise, everyone's going to think this is not a game made by someone that respects people of color, even though I'm a biracial designer. So that's my take.
Awesome. I think for me, one of the biggest impacts is outside people, often white people, but outside people telling me what I'm allowed to make and what I'm not allowed to make. And so I'm in this interesting situation that personally, I've got the white side of my family who I don't really know. I didn't know my biological dad. I don't know anything about my history. On the other side, I've got my mom's family, so I know history going back hundreds of years in Ethiopia. My mom was an immigrant who came to this country. I grew up eating Ethiopian food. I grew up cooking Ethiopian. I grew up hearing Amharic in the house constantly. And then to have that situation where somebody's like, cool, I hear what you're saying, but your skin's too light, so I'm not really comfortable with that. So if you could either one, become blacker, or two, just write white games, I would really appreciate that. And ultimately my decision making, because I'm stubborn and contrary, is to say, no, actually, that's not something I'm going to do. And I'm going to make you as uncomfortably as humanly possible. As a matter of fact, here's a game about why you're a jerk. So I think that there is no part of my game design that it doesn't touch. Much like you both said, it's something that influences every decision, big and small, that I make through game design, because it's such a huge part of who I am. And so it's just like the places that I grew up, the people I grew up around, and the stories that I heard, and people's reaction in the outside world help frame everything that I create as art. That's what I got.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So, how does being biracial impact the jobs that you're offered in the industry?
That goes to you first, Whitney.
No, it doesn't. Oh my gosh, it does. Sorry. I'm a game designer. I know how to read too. I don't know how to read too, apparently.
Would everyone like me to read the questions?
No, I can do it. I'm sorry. I'll say for the most part that my half whiteness does not get me any jobs. The best of both worlds concept is a lie. And a lot of times when not a lot of times, the times that I am offered a job, and it has to do with my my race or ethnicity rather, they're always like quick to point out, like, yes, because we need more, designers of colors. I'm like, okay, so that's what it's about. You don't actually care about, how I talk about non-toxic bro culture, or a sexy aquatic life, or a sex positivity. You just care that I'm not a white person today, and that is like very disappointing and disheartening to me. And then I'll leave it up to the person up here.
So that definitely, I definitely struggle with the point, the aspect of, am I too much of something or too little of another thing? I remember I went for a job interview one time, and because I am a Hasidic Jew, I dress in black and white almost every single day, and I was told that the company itself may have too many Jews working in a certain department, and to tone down kind of my image. So I switched into like wearing a blue shirt, which hurt me inside, because it was like, okay, I have to like take this identity that is my whole and then just push it back into this part. But at the same time, there's a part of me who, I'm also Puerto Rican, and I never was taught Spanish. My father just never taught us, taught my siblings. So there is like this aspect of my culture and my history that I have to do this work to achieve and to come into and to learn about. A lot of people may have already had like their foot in the door already, so to speak, which makes me feel that I have to constantly either like make sure I am meeting standards for what people are looking for and worrying that I am not achieving those standards, even though none of that is true. You don't have to achieve that. You are perfectly good as you are and legitimate as you are. But that is just something I feel when I try to have to go into spaces where I have to like compete for their identity politics and their identity quotas.
Yeah, I feel that I agree with both of you. I've experienced similar things in that I feel like I'm conditionally Black. Sometimes I'm their non-threatening white friend. And other times, like, they're like, oh my goodness, we do not know a single Black person. Wait, there's Camdon. Camdon is super Black. He is the most Black of everyone. And so, it would be cool if we hung out with him and put him on this project. And I'm like, that's great. I mean, like, I am what I am. I can't say if my skin was darker, my experience in life would be different than it is. If my skin was lighter, it would be different than it is. And as described, I would. There's a little knife twist every time somebody hires me for a job and they don't mention my writing, they don't mention my design, they don't mention the work or the art that I create. They mention my heritage, they mention my family, and they mention wanting to be more diverse. Because I think that really defeats the entire purpose of asking for diversity, which is, to increase the width and breadth of art that we have to choose from and experience, and the voices and the histories. And I mean, like, the number of cultures that exist in this world, and the weird monsters, and the kind of traditional stories and the new cutting edge things. We're cheating the entire hobby by limiting it to one little tiny section of the world. And so I feel like it does a disservice to me, to all of us, and to the industry that we love, Well, let's see. So now that we've gotten through that, it's my question time. So this is something I feel really strongly about, and is a good lead-in. And it's what is the impact of biracial representation in games, public attitudes, and overall racism on your place in the community? And growing up, my first game was D&D. It was AD&D. It was old, way back. And the first, I'm going to read a little bit from the 1979 Monsters Manual. Content warning, this is terrible and involves race mixing. So verbatim from the book. Let's see. Half orcs. As orcs will breed with anything, there are any number of unsavory mongrels with orcish blood, particularly orc goblins, orc hobgoblins, and orc humans. Orcs cannot crossbreed with elves. Orcs tend to favor the orcish strain heavily, so are basically orcs, although they can sometimes pass themselves off as true creatures of their other stock. Interestingly, in that same book, half-elves were like, cool, there's no problem with half-elves. We like them. They're great. They're the best of both worlds. Everybody loves them. And the idea that half elves are excluded and have become marginalized was added into the game throughout the years. And so now you've got modern settings where I think it's Wildwood, one of the D&D 5e settings, where one of the kingdoms of elves consider you basically a race traitor if you're a half elf. And like, how do you go into a game, wanting to engage and wanting to love it when literally every biracial character or class inside of this is telling you you're dirty and people hate you? I mean, like, it's like inherent across the board. And people just they don't talk about it. They don't recognize it. It's just like, like, if you're a half elf, people are going to hate you. If you're a half orc, people are going to hate you. If you're half this or if you're half that. And so to me, it's really exclusionary on a foundational level. And I've got, I could go through, there's a gajillion quotes from modern to older books. But it's a through line. And the fact that people have added in recent years, I think is super, super telling to kind of the overall stigma of those things. I have definitely been in situations where I have been told, like I've been asked to be part of a program where they're like, hey, we want marginalized creators here running games, doing stuff. I'm like, cool. They're like, yeah, we didn't really mean you. I'm not sure that you belong here. We were looking for something like a bit more obvious. And at that same convention had people yelling incorrect, but racial slurs at the back of my head and shoving me, like 12 hours later. And, how do you exist in a community when you're dealing with both of those, extremes inside of a day? I don't have a good answer, but Whitney, what about you?
Well, kind of to bounce off your conversation about orcs. My first role-playing game was actually Besum. Big Eye, Small Mouth is kind of like an anime-y role-playing game where you can like fine-tune your character. And I wasn't even thinking high fantasy at the time. Like, okay, I'm a sexy humanoid leopard seal who's also a belly dancer. And that was just my fate for the rest of my life, apparently. It was like, I don't want to be a regular race. I want to be a insert animal humanoid here. Which, I mean, yes, there are, 5e races that are like snakes and cat people, or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I remember when I got into 3.5, I was like a human class because I didn't know what I was doing. And that was like the easiest one to pick from. And that campaign never finished. And after that, we moved to 5th edition, and I decided to go with half orc because I wanted to be a smash character. And I was working on my background, and at the time, that's when I started realizing like how orcs are interpreted in the D&D franchise. And I have become a full advocate of using the phrase, "You're not my dad." And I'm like, okay, so you're going to say that, all half orcs are usually result of, unconsensual sex. I'm going to have my half orc be the daughter of my paladin from my 3.5 edition, getting lost in the desert and finding her future husband. And they have a mutual love for each other, and they get married and have a baby, and it's great and it's fantastic and healthy. So fuck you. And I, switching subjects before I forget, I also noticed that whenever I'm playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game, which usually will have like, looks, names, example, and then they'll have like, races and ethnicities. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I usually don't see biracial as an option. And I remember like,
one.
Oh. What?
No, it's just I have seen it in one game only. You're 100%.
Yeah,
right.
And I remember I was playing, I think, like Velvet Glove or something. And I'm like, is it okay if I'm biracial? I'm like, why am I asking that question? It's like, it's great that they have like the full spectrum, but it's like, but we're part of the spectrum too.
Yeah, and I think this really is kind of like just a hold from our own society. Like I recall growing up and hearing like my mother was not sure how to fill out forms, like because she has to like figure out like what box do I check off for my children, and that becomes an almost reality once again, where I have this character sheet in front of me. And I'm like, what box now do I actually have to check off to pull in this entire like default heritage into like a slot? And I get, our need for kind of categorizations and things like that, kind of. But it becomes just another reminder of how people who don't neatly fit, I suppose, are not going to be represented within this game, and they're going to have an issue. I know Camden mentioned this, but I want to just pull in this one quote that I saw from this D&D Beyond in 2020, that many half-elves unable to fit into either society choose lives of solidarity, wandering or joining with other misfits and outcasts in adventuring life. And that is painful, because it is a reality that a lot of biracial people have to face, in which your own cultural cultures may not respect you, may not accept you. And then when you try to say, I have this like baggage from my life that I'm dealing with, let me go into a fantasy to go and try to escape it, you're immediately just shown this mirror again of how much you do not fit into this society, and probably just go off into a cave by yourself and enjoy that life. It's very painful for that to be a reality within our games, in which we are allowing ourselves to design imagination, worlds and universes that have all these possibilities, and we default ourselves into kind of this really bad space and really bad situation that we're allowing for this to continue on. Stop
it. Agreed. So say we. So I'll add a question on here that wasn't part of the original list, and and I'll start with you, Whitney, this time. What do you think about as you've created your own games and you've started working on them, and you've had these experiences both playing other people's games and in your daily life? You talked about some of the art and how that affected what you've made. But is there a core of is there a through line in the games that you make that you stick to or you avoid as far as that kind of content goes? At all? Do you think that like there's a game where you're like, I've got a message here, even if I didn't realize I was putting it in there?
Usually not about being biracial, actually, which is I'm kind of like disappointed in myself because I decided when I was going into designing games, after being part of Google Plus and hearing so many soapbox conversations about opinions on things that are like icky in society, I'm like, I have to, pick which things I'm going to talk about regularly and stick with that, because I don't want to be like become some muddled entity in the community. So once I realized that Prism wasn't going to be a crunchy, D&D replica, because that's what I was experiencing at first, and had more experience with indie games, I wanted to focus more on social soapboxes instead. And I know if I like look through all of my writing that I've contributed to my game or other games, is I usually talk more about physical comfort in close communities and such. So it's like with Prism, it's no one. I mentioned that no one here is race is not a subject of debate. Your sexual preference is not a subject of your debate. Your job is not a subject of debate. If you're a sex worker, they're like, that's great, pass the butter. So I kind of wanted to create a world where that's just not an issue. So I guess in a way it's like, okay, so in this world, if you're biracial, it's fine because no one cares, but they don't really care if you're one race or the other either, although in prison or families. But in other writings, it's the same thing. It's basically more about taking comfort in each other, whether that be like emotionally or sexually. because I remember, and I was thinking about while you're talking about orcs. It's like when I was a kid, I was watching Land Before Time, and this was before I realized it. When people were being mean to me, it wasn't because of my race or my hair, which was really big at the time. It was because people are assholes or I deserve it. I remember Sarah telling Littlefoot, 3 horns don't play with long necks. And I guess even as a little Whitney, I had like a little tiny bro lobe in the back of my brain saying, "You're not my dad." So so it's like little Whitney from that day decided that they wanted to create games where it's like more about like how these issues aren't issues, but it's not like a dystopian nightmare where it's like everyone pretends to all love each other, but in the shadows, it's all like some government conspiracy or whatever. It's like actually legitimate like community feels and stuff like that. One of the most recent things I wrote, it's again has orcs in it. I wrote a thing about like paladin sex workers that live in cold climates that are like cold climate predators and orcs, because I basically wanted to create a concept where it's like orcs and cold climate predator humanoids are all living together, all in cuddle puddles to keep warm, and no one's like, oh, ew, orcs, or because it's like you don't say ew orcs when they're standing right next to a leopard seal humanoid. So the leopard seal's like, what you saying about my fam? So to answer your question in a nutshell, it basically it challenges me to make every game be basically "you're not my dad's."
That's a running theme. How about you, Avraham?
I think it is a tricky subject when actually designing, because I feel that in like a lot of my stuff, it's I have always like thrown in there like a character will have a specific name that is like part of my culture, but when I'm like designing a larger game with a larger theme within it, I kind of feel that I'm like this child of divorced parents. And like, okay, today I'm going to go visit my mom's side, and today I'm going to go visit my dad's side, and pulling those things together just makes me worried. Like, who's going to want this, And there is this kind of fear that it's just like if I am designing so specifically to an identity that means so much to me, that I've spent so much time learning about, treasuring, and also trying to pass on to my children. Like, I become afraid that it's like so niche that it's just like, no one's really going to want to hear about that or care about that. So I do wind up really doing this whole like, okay, today is this side's game, and next week is this side's game, and it really is a struggle. I find it a lot easier when I'm actually playing games, because I can easily make a character and just be like, they're like this, and it's like me. And but like trying to figure out how to incorporate that into my design without this like this voice in my head that's worried about, is this something that's valid? Which is probably, a lot of things that I'm just dealing with regarding that identity too. Because like within cultures, and especially biracial people, you get a lot of this. You're a half of something, and I'm still trying to figure out what half of that is me. They even like, people within my family will even call like my children Puerto Ricans, which I hate that, because like it impresses upon them that like I have this bloodline that's being like weakened in every single generation, and it's bad. And I don't think they're doing it out of malicious intent, but it is this part of us that we think that there is an easy way to divide up a person into perfect little sections and just put them on these boxes. Ripping down those boxes and figuring out how to put that upon in a game is something I keep on thinking about. want to do and want to showcase within my design and my work. But it's a struggle, definitely a struggle.
Yeah. There was a couple of years ago for the 200-word RPG contest, I made a game called Secret Person of Color that was very, very pointed. There was 200 words. There's no room for subtlety there. But it was really an interesting experience because it was really like based on like conversations I've had a million times in real life. And the reaction from biracial people, and as opposed to the reaction from white people, was pretty dramatically different. And there was the scoring system in the game. There's a scoring system is incredibly skewed against the secret person of color, as it is in real life. And people kept saying, you can't win this game. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That's the whole point of this entire exercise. Yeah. And other people are like, oof, I feel this. This is all the way deep down inside my heart. And I think that one of the cool things about games is that we can tell those stories in super obvious ways, like I did with that. We can tell it in super subtle and narrative ways, like Whitney is doing with the family structure and stuff inside of Prism and games like that. It's, I think that we need it all, I really do. And there's like I said earlier, there's nothing I ever make won't have some little piece of it, even if it's, like I'll stick references to my grandfather inside of things. I will put little calls back to Ethiopia, which you wouldn't know unless you knew something about Ethiopia. If you ask me to pick a deity, I'm going like old school, like can't hardly find it written down Ethiopian mythology that is, lost for 1,000 years. Because to me, it's a way to claim the entirety of me. And being light-skinned, growing up on the West Coast, I was raised. My mom raised me to be an American first and foremost. So I also, aside from a few words, I don't speak American. I was raised to speak English, raised to be an American. I was raised to fit in, which growing up in Alaska, where I did, my mom and I were the only two Black people for literally hundreds of miles around. And so I was only Black. When I grew up, like regardless of how light my skin was, that's all I ever was. And then watching that change as I got older, and being assumed that I was Alaskan Native when we moved to bigger cities, and being assumed that I was Latinx when I was living in Colorado, and those things that kind of morph. When I was a kid, I remember being in Florida to visit my grandmother, who had come over to this country for a brief visit, and my uncle. And it was when this is when there was a huge influx of Cuban refugees. And I was playing with one of the kids down at the pool, and he's like, "Come on, meet my grandmother." And she said something to me in Spanish, and I was like, blink, blink. And she started yelling at me that no one had taught me Spanish, and what is wrong with my parents, and what is wrong with my family. And I'm like, and he's like, "Grandma, no. So it's hard for me to not put that in my games, because I actually think it's interesting. I think that what we're all doing in our own ways is adding in those important pieces of conversation that fight back against the inherent message of so many games today, which is you are going to be excluded, you are impure, and you don't really belong here. That's my 2 cents.
I have a question from the audience, if you guys would like to take that now.
That'd be great.
The question is, what brings you the most joy in game design? Not specific to, but could include aspects of being a biracial designer.
Who wants to take it?
There is no incoming call.
Oh, sorry. My echo got very angry with me.
I'm going to throw it to Whitney first.
Okay. What brings me the most joy? As of now, I can say this actually sort of has to do with being biracial, and also being a child of divorced parents. Is that my colored side of the family did not teach me joy of my hair, so I did not love being a curly girl until I got into college. Because I was surrounded by people, including people of color, that wanted my hair to be straight or would throw things at my hair or call me names. And my dad's side of the family didn't know what to do with said hair. So everything I designed up until college was a bunch of straight-haired white people, because I was not fueled with any sense of pride of being anything but white. And all I want to do as far as content was concerned at the time was Italian gangster stuff, because that's all Italians are known for, spaghetti and gangster films. And when I finally got to college, that was when I decided to take more pride in my hair. And that is when I decided to draw more characters with hair textures. And it also brought to my attention other things that aren't often drawn in artwork, such as people with freckles, for example. Being a biracial game designer brings me joy, because I, as a person who has had to, live a life where I feel kind of like the odd one out, is that I can make content that puts that kind of stuff in the forefront. So it's like, a hot girl, a hot colored girl with textured hair, a hot redhead with freckles. It's like all of that's just, bringing all that stuff into what I design and my drawing content. If that makes any sense. I don't know if it did or not. Once I said it, I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I feel like I'm rambling at this point.
You're good, Whitney. I'll jump in next. I say this a lot, and because I mean it, but I think that one of the most beautiful parts of gaming, and sort of where I feel like a lot of the art comes from, is making real emotions from imagined situations. And for me, there's those moments where I put a piece of my heart down on a page and create a situation that is like deeply personal, and to have people react to that, like on a deeply human level, with like real feeling, whether that's joy or sadness or, grief or anger, whatever it is, but like real emotion, keeps me going all the time, and helps me put up with the nonsense, because I think that is something really cool and special about games. We certainly, when we watch a movie, we'll often have that same emotional reaction, but generally I consider that more of a singular experience. And at a gaming table, I find that it's more of a shared experience, even if it's with, one or five other people. You have those moments to talk about, like you had just done something, like you'd just gone adventuring, or you had just, talked to a friend who, really needed you and helped them see the world differently. And so that still brings me so very, very much joy, especially when I see my own emotions from the foundation of why I created a thing reflected in other people's experience at a table.
Why did I let you go first?
Sorry.
For me, I am definitely after that kind of like the emotional aspect regarding in games and design, but there is this part of me that I think a lot of the things that I do start from an inside joke that really like resonates with me, and then that spirals into something else that's weird and strange and out there. And I think having that I think like helps me just maintain this excitement, because it's this part that amuses me and excites me, and I am allowing that to grow and to manifest itself, and then hopefully share it with everyone else.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions, Abby?
That's it so far. So do you have another question in your queue?
I actually see a question on the chat of have there been opportunities in games where you feel like you have been able to celebrate or recognize your biracial reality in ways that you aren't able to in non-RPG spaces?
Good question.
If I'm hearing the question correctly, I want to give a very big shout out to Harlem Unbound, because that was the first role-playing game that I've ever opened up, and not only was it, it was a game that is specifically focused on Black people. It is a game that had as its default for the religious like, I guess, class in the game, a rabbi, and it was this first space in which I kind of like I had this like moment of like there's something that I know and something that I can be, and it's not this default of kind of like Christian default that I see in most role-playing games. If you open up some of the other like kind of dungeon adventuring games, there's a very specific idea of what religion looks like, and it's not me. And having that, seeing that was a very, very important moment to me, and it really made me so happy to just have that from there.
Yeah, I think that in my participation inside of RPGs, I have only been ever tasked with writing about one half of myself. So I don't feel like I've certainly been excited to put like pieces of Ethiopia into a game, which I've done before, hoping that somebody would have that moment like you did, Avraham, where they would open it up and they're like, Queen Goody, are you kidding me? Like nobody knows who she is. And so that, that really, I hope to be that for somebody at some point. But I would love to see a moment where one of us picked up a book and, like you're flipping through and, I'm like, what? Half white, half Ethiopian as a superhero. What the hell is going on here? I think that with the important conversations that we're starting to have about race, even that term inside of RPGs and things like that, the ways that those topics are starting to be pulled apart and looking at the component parts and kind of what's the foundation of them. I'm really excited about what will come in the next 10 years. But right now, my biracial identity has not been welcome in a game that I didn't write.
Like I said before, like creating worlds where race or family or ancestry or ethnicity is not really discussed has become my MO. So I don't really talk about being biracial in any of the content I create. But I know in the content I do create, I kind of like create like the world that I wish little Whitney had, Like, I know a lot of the times I create worlds where the background stories are about, two parents that love each other and aren't, going to split up. I create worlds where, like, bringing up, non-toxic bro culture again. Like, if I run a campaign of a game and I, okay, this humanoid shark bro is celebrating a baby shower with her other bros. And I kind of imagine it as someone who is probably could be a mixed person, but it doesn't matter that they are or not, because, it's inclusive. And I know I created I worked on a scenario for a game where aquatic people and humans, court each other. And it was important to me since, obviously their offspring are going to be half one thing or another, like half of the sea and half of the land, that it's not going to be like, okay, well, if you were more land than sea, your sea family want nothing to do with you, and vice versa. So it was important to me that I write in that, there was a child that was born more land than sea, but the father of the child who is of the sea, comes and sings them to sleep at night, so they know that they're still loved by the sea. And saying that out loud, I didn't even realize that I basically made it a scenario for Curse of Brookwood that was basically about a bunch of biracial people.
It sneaks up on you.
Yeah, so thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I've never done that, except this time I clearly did.
I didn't even think about it. Because it was more. It wasn't even like about race. It was more like, children that want to be, that I want to be loved by mom and dad. Because as a divorced kid, sometimes you don't feel that way, and you have like all these outside forces who are, one half of the family or the other. That's like, oh, your dad's so great, or oh, your mom's so great. I'm like, you're not with my mom and my dad 24/7, and you don't know what being in a divorce cycle is like. So, yeah. So I feel like being a friendless kid, a kid of divorced parents, and a kid who's biracial, like, created like a cocktail of what I wanted to include in my artwork and in my writing.
All right, I think we have time for one more audience question, because we're at about 13 minutes till the end, and then I will ask each of you to just reiterate who you are and where people can buy your stuff and find you on social media. So the question is, does your game design steer away from fantasy races, or do you lean into them? And we're going to start with Camdon this time.
All right. It leans pretty strongly away from them. As a matter of fact, I prefer to a lot of the games that I make are in modern settings because I like to shine a spotlight on things. When it comes to things, I'm like, sure, we could have metaphor here, or I could just explicitly lay it out. So they were conversations that always made me so uncomfortable that people were kind of ignoring when I was a kid. There was issues when I was coming up playing, primarily fantasy games that just felt weird and wrong to me, but I seemed to be the only person that saw it. And so I never said anything. And as a consequence of that, I tend to run away from it and not deal with those things. I think that when you've got some of the issues that, with orcs and half orcs, like orcs as a whole, or, have issues. You've got all of the things that we mentioned earlier, and you're also experiencing those things at the table with the people, the actual humans. You're also experiencing some of those same things from them. It's not a place that I ever felt really was for me. like literally was not for someone like me. So consequently, I don't feel welcome designing there either. How about you?
Yeah, I don't really do. I haven't done anything that includes fantasy races in it because I'm really kind of focused in on presenting this rich culture that I feel like people don't know about and don't get to be excited about, and people who are even in that culture are told not to be excited about. And I think for this moment in time, my real design focus is I want people to feel good about who they are, where they come from. And I think just at this point, I would like to continue to put a spotlight to how awesome people from like my culture are, and bless you, and the heritage that I was not privy to learn about until my adult life. I want to help unlock that, even if it is in game form, to someone else who might be looking.
All right, thank you, Whitney.
As I've stated several times already, because I'm obsessed with it, I don't really do high fantasy races because I'm too busy making undersea life humanoids. But there is one race I kind of fiddled with before Prism was finalized because for some reason I was really into droughts at the time. I think it was because it was a webcomic I was reading. And then getting into the community, I started hearing about all like the drought blackface issues, and that like "You're Not My Dad" lobe started like firing off in my brain. And I created a family in Prism called Weed Folk, who they're not drow, but they have gray skin and freckles. And while they're frowned upon by their kind of like sister family, which are plant folk, it's more like the embarrassed older sibling who's texting and shops at the popular white girl stores, being embarrassed about their little sibling that's playing in the mud all day and rolling their eyes like I can't believe we're related. So it doesn't like it's not it doesn't become like a racing. It's more like a I'm a posh person that's going to the theater, and my little sister likes tending to the farm and flexing and showing off by by shotgunning an entire keg. So that's probably my only experience with working with like the regular high fantasy races, because I feel like they've like been done enough already. So I don't really feel like I could do anything cool or nuanced with them.
Awesome. Thank you. Do any of you have any last thoughts that you want to put in before we head towards wrap up?
I'll jump in as the person who hates the silence.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I think that the conversations that we have, that we're having today and will continue to grow over the coming years, I think are incredibly important. And I think that there is a lot of nuance when it comes to these topics and designing in them and the stories that we're going to tell in the future. And I think if I could say anything to like folks out there, and with a similar background to any of us, you're not alone. And the things that you see out there that, kind of make it, kind of cringe or twitch, or you're not the only one that sees it, even though it's not a conversation that a lot of people are having. And that when it comes time, if you're in a space where you want to make art and you want to create your games, whatever that looks like, once again, you're not alone. Tell those stories that are most important for you to tell, and give other people the moment where they're like, they see in the printed word, I'm not alone.
Great. Avraham?
That is very beautiful. And I definitely want that to be conveyed. That there are so many experiences that a person is going to find and have and learn about within themselves. And that we really need to see that just as like the people that we interact with, the cultures that exist there, our understanding of them in a fantasy world has been corrupted by people who have been very much about oppressing and subjugating another group of people. And that is one thing I am hoping that we as game designers begin to move away from, that there is no such thing as evil or good races. There are people that do good and bad things in the world, and their cultures and their heritages are aspects that help them kind of define and give information and substance to the world that they live in, but do not define it on that where they come from or who they are becomes a moral aspect. You would never say that to a person. You would never go out, hopefully you don't, go out and say that to a person that they are, because they are from this culture, they have these tendencies. Move that away from your conversation with race in game design for good.
Whitney?
My final thoughts are, if you are, like one of us and, do not feel like you have to be a soapbox or advocating or being a champion or something. If you want to write a thing about, puppies and that is it, that is perfectly fine. You design what makes you happy. But I implore you, if you too have a "you're not my dad" lobe in your brain, let that flag fly and tell the world you're not my dad.
I think that may be a perfect summation for this panel. All right, Whitney, if people want to find you online, they want to buy Prism, they want to buy your art, where do they go?
They can find my artwork and places to find my game at littlewishproductions.com. They can also find me on Twitter at Whittle Dragon, and they also can find me here on Discord, whatever. I think it's like Whitney Delaglio #5004. I don't know how Discord works yet. I'll figure it out one day.
Great. Avraham?
Yes, if you want to follow me, I am on Twitter at Avrlog, AVRLOGG. From there is a link to my itch account if you want to see the tiny weird game out there for you.
And Camden.
You can find me at all my games are listed on my company website, umg.rocks, Unicorn Motorcycle Games. You can find me on Twitter at Camdon, CAMDON, or on Facebook, Camdon Wright.
Fantastic. Thank you for participating, everybody. This was really valuable. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having us, Abby.
Yay.
Good idea, Whitney. Thank you.